Let's dive into messaging. But before we do that, before we get into the nitty gritty of messaging and how to do it, can you define messaging? A lot of people hear the term messaging and positioning for that matter, and they don't really know what it means because it can be applied in lots of different ways. Let's start with Marketing 101. How do you define messaging?
It's a great place to start. It's really important. So, messaging for me, it's what you say about your product or your service or your solution. That's it in a nutshell, in one sentence. Messaging is what you say. Um, Many people confuse messaging with copywriting, right? So, I think that's the big elephant in the room that a lot of the time people are talking about messaging and really they're talking about the copy and the words on the page. But copywriting is then how you say that messaging, how you say that message. So that's the way that I look at it. Really simply, messaging is what you say, and copywriting is kind of how you say it. So messaging, is really the foundation for strong, effective copywriting. And messaging is really based on and informed by your positioning, your unique positioning in the market. It's informed by your mission as a company, who you stand for, what you do, what you're all about, your values. The way that I approach messaging, it's identifying and putting out the most essential things, the key things about your product that people need to know about and why that matters to the audience.
Great answer. Another question for you from a basics point of view. What's the difference between messaging and positioning? People think they're the same. In simple terms, how are they different?
That's a great point. And I know you're the positioning expert, so you should also be answering this and you're going to be judging me hard on this one. The way that I look at things is, if we imagine this kind of a triangle at the base, and we have copy on the top, below this we have messaging, and below this we have positioning, and then below this, right at the bottom, we have like the whole business strategy. Everything kind of sits on top of each other. So that's the way that I look at it. When I come in and help companies with messaging, I can't help them get it right if they don't have a clue about their positioning. The way that I break down positioning is, what do you do? Who for? Which little corner of the market, which group of people do you help and are you dedicated to? So it's really about your positioning, your unique positioning in the market, where you sit and why anyone should care about you, what you can own. So that's the way that I look at it. I know that's not a clean and crisp definition because I don't know a dictionary definition of positioning, but I know that it informs all of the work that I do. And if you don't have any clarity on who your customers are, why you're different than everybody else, then the work that we do around your messaging is really hard.
You and I are aligned in many, many ways. And I will note that when I start working with new clients, I always start with positioning because no matter how good they think their positioning is, there's two things that happen. One is that they got a very biased view of the world. They
Yeah.
operate in the eye of the hurricane. So sometimes they lack perspective. And the second thing when it comes to positioning and messaging for that matter is that the market changes.
Yeah.
Economics landscape changes, consumers' interests change, the competitive landscape changes, and that positioning and messaging constantly have to be updated. They're very fluid, dynamic creatures. And it's not one of these things where you set it and forget it. You're always looking at your positioning, exploring it, and figuring out whether it's still relevant. So that's the one thing I did want to point out.
I want to throw this back to you. How do you define positioning?
That's a great question. And thank you for putting me on the spot.
I gave the long-winded answer, and my answer for messaging was like short and snappy because I talk about it all the time. I know you do a lot more work on positioning than I do. So how do you define it?
If I had to boil down positioning to its essence, it really
Mhm.
comes down to what do you do? Who do you serve? Why what you do matters to the people that you serve. So, what are the
Mhm.
benefits? Why do they care? And the last one is how are you unique or different? Those are the four pillars. And the one thing I will emphasize when it comes to positioning is that your uniqueness, how you differentiate yourself, doesn't
Mhm.
have to be a major thing. It can be
Mhm.
very, very small. But if that small thing matters to the people that matter to you and it's important to them, then you can separate yourself from your competitors simply by being slightly different. A lot of companies struggle with positioning and messaging because they think that it has to be something dramatic. That's why a lot of companies embrace category creation, because they believe that that's the way that they stand out from the crowd. And it's very tough to
Mhm.
do that. But if you can outflank the competition in a small way, then you've got positioning that can be very, very effective. So that's my definition of positioning. How do you think I did?
I love that. I love it. And I love the point you've made about differentiation not having to be huge is incredibly important, and this feeds into your messaging as well. And it's so funny because I was having this conversation an hour ago with another marketer, a CMO. We were talking about this idea of like radical point of view, radical differentiation as well as a kind of a topic and a concept is huge. And your differentiation doesn't have to be radical. What it does have to be is relevant. And that comes down to, again, knowing what you do and who for, and knowing your customers inside and out. Because if what you do is super relevant to me, that's enough to differentiate you from everyone else. I love that. You passed the
Yeah.
test. We both did, hopefully.
Well,
Flying colors.